So, three things: intelligent understanding, perceptive listening, and the ability to master the text. And all these three things are linked by the ability to adapt. Okay. But we must allow, in tradition, for moments of brilliance to interrupt and give energy to our lesson. No, I'm going to really terrify you now. Does anybody want to answer me? What do you think is your job now? We know what my job is. What is your job now? Anybody?
What do you like to...
What? Listening? Oh, that's so boring. Aren't you going to do something else? What is your name? Ira. Some of you are taking notes. At the back, some of you are slightly sleeping. This is very positive. Who's sleeping the most? Let's see, what do we got? What does it look like from up here? You see, sometimes when you're teaching, you need to go among your students, sit down, and look at what's going on down there. You have to see things from another point of view. It's all about empathy. The first thing that you have to do in a lecture is to make sure you don't go to sleep. One way to do that is to take notes. When you are talking on the mobile, sometimes you talk with one hand and you draw things with the other. It doesn't really matter what you do as long as you're doing something, because you cannot just sit and listen. That is passive. You have to be active.
When you have a cartoon, you control the medium completely. When you have a film, you have to deal with these horrible things called actors. So, anyway, I'm going to talk today, now, and this is something I wrote last night. And I was going to continue writing a lot more of it, so it's not as long as you think it's going to be. If it gets too long, you can start making noises. But I was going to continue writing a lot more this morning, and then I suddenly had a student arrive who wanted attention. So the details about, I would tell you where I was going to add some details. We're not going to get those details, so you have to do that work yourself. Okay? What I'm going to talk about, come further down towards the front, because I have no microphone. Come down. There's so much space. Look at the space here. No, there's a rather lovely statement by Julie Andrews, you know, the lady from The Sound of Music and Mary Poppins, and you don't think of her as being terribly bright, or she is. She's incredibly bright, incredibly spot on. She's written a brilliant little biography, or autobiography, memoir. I just stick her right up at the top, and she comes out with this line, and the difference between an amateur and a professional. An amateur rehearses until they get it right. A professional rehearses until they cannot get it wrong. And this is the point, Mrs. Skewton. Mrs. Skewton is in a book called Dombey and Son. It's not a very well-known Dickens book. It's not one of the big ones, like Nicholas Nickleby or David Copperfield, but it's well worth reading. It's very long. If you carry it around with you, A, you'll be doing some serious exercise, but B, everybody will be so impressed. Oh, what are you reading? Oh. Dombey and Son, and the joke is that actually it's really not about a son at all. The son dies in the first few pages. It's about the fact that the father needed a son or wanted a son, and in fact what he's got is a daughter, and he treats her with complete contempt for most of the novel. And anyway, but it's very touching. Try and read it. So Mrs. Skewton, who is particularly nasty to her daughter Edith. Everybody's nasty to the daughters in this novel. And you have to imagine Mrs. Skewton is one of those people a little bit like Maggie Smith, with a rather arch voice. Does anybody watch Downton Abbey? There you are. This is Downton Abbey, okay? So, Mrs. Skewton is in her drawing room with the maid, flowers, and her butler, who also pushes her chair, and the butler is called, it begins with a W, Wicks or something. Dickens, to complete his nastiness, calls this lady, Mrs. Skewton, Cleopatra. She is never called Cleopatra in real life. Dickens invents this idea that she is Cleopatra, and she sort of, so imagine this 80-year-old lady wearing dresses that would better suit somebody in their teens and behaving as if she is incredibly attractive, which she is, of course. But she's also a miserable old miser. She treats her daughter appallingly. There is really nothing good that you can say about this lady, but Dickens manages at the end to do so. She is sort of redeemed. So it's not all horrible. Now, I'm going to read this, but it is very cruel. They were assembled in Cleopatra's room. The serpent of old Nile was reposing on her sofa, sipping her morning chocolate at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And Flowers, the maid, was fastening on her youthful cuffs and frills and performing a kind of private coronation ceremony on her with a peach-coloured velvet bonnet, the artificial roses in which nodded to uncommon advantage as the palsy trifled with them like a breeze. "I think I am a little nervous this morning, Flowers," said Mrs. Skewton. "My hand quite shakes." "You were the life of the party last night, madam, you know," returned Flowers, "and you suffer for it today." Edith, who had beckoned Florence to the window, was looking out with her back to the toilette of her esteemed mother, and suddenly withdrew, as if lightened. "My dear child," cried Cleopatra languidly, "you are not nervous? Don't tell me, my dear Edith, that you, so enviably self-possessed, are beginning to be a martyr too, like your unfortunately constituted mother. Withers, someone at the door.